Is everyone hydrated, thriving, not so hydrated?
Cool, so I'm gonna kick this off since I'm officially the moderator, but Evan, you're probably a little bit better than I am. So as was mentioned, this is about identity. So on the stage, I'll let introduce, but this is, I think, gonna be all about where decentralized identity is today, maybe a little bit of the history. We're gonna talk about on-chain, off-chain, and we have Optimism, Disco, and then Impact Network, Impact Cards. So we're gonna kick it off. I wanna give everybody a chance to talk about your company and then where you sit in the spectrum of on-chain and off-chain, and then we'll dive in a little bit more. So Evan, if you want to go ahead and kick it off.
Thank you so much, Kames. Truly an honor to have the opportunity to sit on stage with you here, my friend, after many years of asking hard identity questions together. So my name is Evan McMullen, and I am the chief instigator at the Disco. You can visit us always at disco.xyz. And we are the purveyors of fine data backpacks. We make it easy for you to own and control all kinds of data with your keys, not just your tokens. Because right now, according to Web3, all of you are just piles of tokens to me. But I want you to be your full selves, your full friends with your favorite colors and preferences, the things that you like to do, being able to show up in your entirety to Web3. At Disco, we care about all the data that's not fit for the chain. So data that describes human beings, data that does not require global public immutability, data that is portable and needs to change and evolve like we do because we are humans.
Great, thank you.
Hello, I'm Masha, and I'm a co-founder of Impact Cards, which is a project that kind of sits in the middle of on-chain and off-chain, and it's bringing together your identity in a unified way with on-chain actions, off-chain credentials, and then cross-chain actions as well.
Cool. Hi, I'm Kelvin. I work on the Optimism Collective, and Optimism is kind of on-chain maxi. We think everything is actually a blockchain, in some abstract sense, and in the future, everything is going to live on-chain, and we need to figure out how to make it work. So, cool. I don't know.
Thank you. So I want to, dive down in a little bit what decentralized identity is. I think normally people think about it as like a Facebook login or Google Auth in terms of internet identity, but I think both spaces have landed on attestations, and I just kind of want to dig in, why have attestations been so core to identity? So I'm going to let you kick it off, Kelvin, and then Disco, you can follow up as well, or Evan.
Cool, yeah. I mean, attestations are very easy to think about, right? An attestation at a high level is just one address or one account making a statement about another account, and that's such a simple primitive that it's just really, it's really easy to wrap your head around. And I think it's also clear how, if you think about identity for more than like 2 minutes, you realize that it's this very complicated thing that evolves from the relationships that you have with other people and institutions and all these different things. And so it seems natural that that identities would also evolve out of these attestations, which are really describing relationships between different entities.
Evan, you want to get a chance?
So at Disco, we think of your identity as what you know, who you are, what you can prove, what memory you leave behind when you leave the room, but persists in the minds of the people around you. So your identity changes and evolves because you are a human being, right? If you were if you were made to apply to jobs with your 2008 MySpace profile, how would that go for you, right? Our identities are not fixed and public and permanent, and so a blockchain is not an appropriate or legal place to store data about them. So when we think about the context of attestations, actually, to take a little step back here, let's talk about gossip. When you hear a really juicy piece of gossip, the amount that you believe in it depends on how much you trust the person who told you. And that is the deal with attestations, right? You will trust a statement as much as you trust the party who said it to be a subject matter expert on that particular topic. And so in Web3, when we bring qualitative data in, when we bring observed data that does not come from a machine necessarily, or is not settled in on a public ledger setting, someone needs to make an utterance, an attestation, a statement about someone else in order for us to capture this kind of data. So when we think about trust at Disco, we think about it as signatures all the way down. How much do you trust the people who are giving you the good gossip, the hot tea that your smart contract interactions are predicated upon?
Cool. Thank you. So as we dive into this a little bit, I think the question is, why decentralized identity at all? We have these Web2 solution providers, the traditional ones being Google, Facebook, you log in with them. And so I think the question is always why? So why, we have crypto Twitter, a lot of people have their identity there, and this is a lot of friction to move to a new system. So I think the question is, what's going to make this better? Why is decentralized identity, why is the time now? So I'll go ahead and kick it off. Masha, if you want to take that one.
Yeah, so obviously we have seen some problems with Twitter. We can't control where our followers go and where they go. Every time we go to a new platform, we have to restart. We have to gain our following again. And so what's great about finding more Web3 solutions is that these can be more modular solutions. We can take our followers with us. We can take our attestations, our credentials with us, whether that's on-chain or off-chain. And that's something that we're really looking forward to, yeah.
Cool. And then, do Kelvin or Evan, would you like to take that question as well?
Oh, hell yeah. So when we think about, how we start to accrue data around ourselves, how we start to discern what we trust, what we do not trust, right? We need a lot of context there. We need the capability to move beyond the only data we can carry with us from app to app right now, which are our tokens. And we need the context of our accomplishments, our knowledge, our expertise, our qualifications and memberships. And so in order for us to carry more than just our money from app to app, we need decentralized identity. We need identity where we can logically centralize data around ourselves, because we are the world's expert in being us. It is weird if someone else knows more about you than you do, right? That's not very effective or efficient. But we can physically decentralize the storage of where that data lives, where it goes to sleep at night. Fred Ursum, very famous investor, is known for saying that you have fragments of yourself scattered across the apps that you use. A little bit of yourself on Twitter, a little on Instagram, a little on Google. But at Disco, we do not believe that you are just a pile of shattered fragments. You are a disco ball. You are the same person who shows up to your Bitcoin account, to your Ethereum account, to your Gmail address. And so that is why we should logically centralize and physically decentralize the data that we carry with us.
Cool. Thank you. So Kelvin, I'm going to point this one to you, because I think Optimism has been doing a lot of work recently with public goods, and there's a lot of need for Sybil resistance there. And so I think, as you said, you see everything as blockchain. So I just want to ask the question of why a blockchain, what makes this a good fit for what you're trying to do as opposed to some of the other solutions, and is that the way forward completely, or do you see a world in where there's a balance between on-chain and off-chain as well?
Yeah, I mean, well, okay, there's a lot of different things there. Blockchains are very, we're going to get to this point relatively soon, probably within the next, 5 years, 10 years, where we really scale to the point that blockchains are just they're just better. Straight up, if you have built an app and you've thought about, okay, am I going to go on AWS and spin up a server and a database, and then I'm going to expose it to the internet and do all this. At a base level, blockchains are just better ways to build software, and we don't really think about it that way right now because it's so expensive to use these systems. But at the point where these systems get really, really cheap, it just makes sense to use them for pretty much everything, because why not? And I think that this is going to just expand to the point where most compute happens on chain. And so there's this, I think that there's, intuitively, I think that there's going to happen, this thing is going to happen where it becomes unclear where the boundary of off-chain and on-chain even is. I think everything's going to kind of run in this, you'll run a chain and then you'll sort of be able to choose whether you connect it on chain or not, or to you connect it to the rest of the network. But if you start thinking about everything as a blockchain, and things get much easier, I do think that realistically people are going to want to run data storage and compute systems where they are in control and they're running it and they control who gets to see the data. That seems like a very reasonable thing to want to have. But ultimately, I think that this boundary between off-chain and on-chain is going to become much more fluid as time goes on. And it's really just going to become a question of what does the access control look like? How do people pick what they share and what they don't share? And so I think from the optimism perspective, it's kind of just been like, we don't know what the off-chain thing is going to look like. We think it's all going to look like blockchains all the way down. And so we've started with just aggressively putting things on-chain, on-chain in the way that people currently think of on-chain. And I think it'll lead to what we call off-chain eventually.
So to answer one of the questions that you posed, let's put everything on a blockchain. Why not? I have a question for the audience. Imagine your future grandchildren. Do you want them looking at the timestamps of your porn consumption? Raise of hands. Who wants that? Who's excited about that future? That is why we don't put everything on chain. Let's imagine the Tinder of Web3, right? You're right swiping through all of these cute people that you want to see later at these parties. Do you want your right swipes to be saved on chain for future generations to see at 11:30 at night, this is the person my grandfather was willing to go on a date with? So I think public persistence, consent is imperative as consent is imperative as we contemplate the superpower of public persistence. So as we think about, our sort of human context, right? Consent is the core principle of civilized society. Privacy is a core tenet of our freedom of assembly, of our freedom of religion. Blockchains, public ledgers, are consent-free environments. If I have your public key, I can map anything to it that I want, and you can't stop me. So in order to introduce consent, to bring the privacy enablement and the active, informed choice to share oneself with others from physical space into Web3, we cannot rely on public immutability alone. We must introduce consent and autonomy along with financial capabilities.
Yeah, that was a great segue there. So I think, we had the opportunity to work in the past, Evan, on Uport and decentralized identity. And I think a lot of what we realized is there are laws outside of blockchain. There's GDPR. There's a few others. I want to see if you could just dive into a little bit of the thinking or what you've been exposed to recently and what kind of drives why we shouldn't have that on blockchains and why everything shouldn't be there a little bit further in relation to laws we have today.
So I am so sad to be the one to tell all of you that despite our best efforts here at ETH Denver, we still do live in a society with rules. And so some of those rules include, in the state of California, for example, if you handle more than $25 million worth of data, your company is obligated to tell its customers if they ask what data you have, how you are using it, and to delete it if they request. If you put data about a human being on a blockchain, of course, you know that you cannot delete that. And so inherently, if your business is, in a simple manner, putting clear text data about human beings on a blockchain, if your customers, your users live in the state of California and make that request, you are in for a world of hurt. This is very similar to the Global Data Protection Resolution in Europe. Many data privacies and data sovereignties laws across the world lever, very significant financial fines for abusing the data of users, for turning people into data exhibitionists without their informed consent. And so at Disco, we think a lot about how we can assist businesses to be compliant with these laws, how we can honor and prioritize the active consent of individuals, but still enjoy the fluidity and personalization of Web2 style apps that we have today. So all of the personalization and delight of your newsfeed, none of the creepy big brother selling your data or someone over-publicizing your life without your consent. Another interesting challenge about the way that data assets and sort of law are treated here is that in the United States, data is treated as a business asset. In Europe, it is treated as a part of the body, part of a function of your existence, a unit of work product, the result of dignified labor. And so as we think about the legal consequences of our data, we can have a lot of fun experimenting when we are beneath the threshold of legal compliance. But we must also remember that when we publicize data, we can inadvertently harm marginalized communities. Let us think, when was the last time we had a public registry of ethnic minorities? And how did that go? Even let's say, for college diplomas, something that feels inoffensive, let's say you send a zero knowledge attestation to someone's public key that they're a graduate of Bennett College. There's a high likelihood that person is a black woman because that is a historically black university for women. So when we play with tools on chain, we must remember, are we publicizing the data that we already use to marginalize people? what are the consequences of our choices as we practice this design? And so I want to invite everyone here to contemplate design justice in your own practice. When you ship features, do you have a good handle on how they will affect the lives of the people who will use them? And if they are immutable features, have you thought about what that means 25 years from now?
Cool. Thank you, Evan. I want to just give a chance to Kelvin to respond to that, and then Masha, I'd like to give you a question as well. But I got the chance to see your talk this morning, Kelvin, about identity, and you mentioned zero knowledge proofs and these other technical solutions that can kind of maybe overcome some of these problems. So to be unbiased, I want to give you a chance to really talk about, is there a way forward using change and using some of those technologies in the future where things can live on chain, but we can still protect people in the ways that Evan just described? And what does that look like for you in terms of scalability and usability for these users?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to disagree that there is information that needs to be private. I'm also not going to disagree that there is public information that, if publicized more widely and made permanent, becomes harmful, right? There's like, in New York, they have this thing called ACRIS, and it's a database of everyone who has bought a home. So you can just like look people's names up, and you can see where they live, and you can see how much their mortgage is. It's like, that seems dangerous, but it's completely public, and you could put attestations about it on chain and be a big problem. So clearly this information is useful. We need to figure out a way to make this information accessible on chain if we want to, for instance, give an application the ability to provide a service to an address that is tied to a unique identity. And so there has to be some system by which we can, at least in a privacy-preserving way, prove convincingly to an application that I'm a unique person, I'm not pretending to be somebody else, this is my address, and I want to be able to use this service. So, it's complicated because we want to be able to use the information on chain, but we don't want all the information to be publicly accessible on chain. And then so naturally the zero knowledge proofs are sort of the construct that allow you to do things like this. And so it seems like an appropriate fit. But without this, it's very hard to do the sort of decentralized governance, Sybil-resistant decentralized governance that we want to do, or we fall back on plutocracy. So I think that fundamentally there has to be a middle ground. We have to make this information accessible on chain in some form, but there's definitely a too far in either direction, where we go too far in the privacy-preserving way where it's not useful, or we go too far in the public direction where it's clearly dangerous. So maybe my real answer is that I sit somewhere in the middle and I don't know how to get there.
Great answer, thank you. So Masha, I want to give you a chance to speak up as well. So to bring this a little closer to home or more, what's kind of next? I think there's decentralized identity for a lot of different things. You can use Sybil resistance, incentives, wanting privacy, consent. I just want to ask, what are you most excited about decentralized identity moving forward in these next couple of months or years? What gets you excited about the space and problems you want to solve?
Yeah, so right now with decentralized identity, obviously sitting between two real leaders in the space, both Optimism and Disco, it's going to be really interesting to see how both of these technologies scale and become easier to use. So with impact cards, it's a dynamic NFT that shows your on-chain, off-chain, and cross-chain actions. But with the off-chain actions, it's a visual representation, a change based on those off-chain actions. So the off-chain data never comes on-chain. So there are ways for us to show the things that we're doing, the communities that we're participating in, without getting too specific, without getting too granular. And so what I'm really excited about is to find pieces of technologies and use cases that mold both of these technologies together. And so impact cards is a great first example of this, and I'm really excited to see more of these instances. I think Gitcoin Passport is working on Sybil resistance. A project like Impact Cards could plug into a Gitcoin Passport, could further, Sybil resistance, initiatives. And that I think is going to make the space as a whole a lot better and a lot more easy to use and scale some off-chain credential use cases, especially with more sensitive information and things that we want to keep on-chain. And then I'm also really excited to have better, more complex and dynamic experiences overall, and I think that is something that off-chain offers us. On-chain is so far pretty limited, it's pretty transactional, and off-chain allows for more of those qualitative data points to be brought into our experience. Speaking to the UX and the usability of crypto, I think that will be absolutely essential for how we move forward in the space.
Could I just jump in for a quick second, James?
I was going to pass it to you, so go ahead.
Amazing, thank you. So Kelvin posed a fantastic question that I want to make sure that we address. How might we rely on verifiable off-chain data to inform or gate access to on-chain actions? How can we keep data private, yet still resolvable to inform our on-chain settlement? So I'll tell you about how we do it at Disco, thanks to our help from our collaborators at District Labs and Kames. So leveraging the delegatable framework with MetaMask, we're able to generate a signature at the app layer, basically like a thumbs up or a green light, that you have the private or off-chain requirements that will allow you to interact with this on-chain contract. So if you go to, I think it's disco.districtlabs.xyz, you are going to be able to connect your wallet if you have a Disco data backpack already set up. If you have a Disco credential in your data backpack off-chain, you will be permitted to mint that NFT on-chain. This does not carry that information from your credential on-chain. It's simply that green light, that plus sign, that thumbs up to allow you in. Similarly, this is the same motion by which we could use an off-chain KYC credential to grant access to an on-chain permissioned KYC-only DeFi pool. So everywhere that you can use a token for access control, on-chain smart contracts, physical spaces, Google Drive, Telegram chats and channels, Shopify e-commerce, you can also use off-chain credentials. There is no reason that you can't preserve the privacy of off-chain data and not be able to still leverage it in your smart contract interactions throughout EVM and beyond.
Thank you. And I also want to, Kelvin, give you a chance to answer this as well. Just in the next 3 to 6 months, I know, Optimism Collective is very active with civil resistance and public goods. Is attestations going to play a big part in that, or is that still an experiment? How does that play out for you guys in the short term, and what value do you want to provide to your community using these attestations?
Yeah, I mean, fundamentally, the way that the Optimism Collective is set up is that there's this. And I think we would all agree that plutocracy is not a long-term mechanism for making good decisions, and so you need an identity layer, and so we have to build the thing. So the attestation system that we're building is our attempt at creating the data set that will allow us to then extract identities that we can use for the rest of the system. So. I mean, I think it's going to take a little while to develop. I think a big part of this, the challenge or the problem space is you need an enormous amount of information to be able to extract things like identity in a decentralized way, right? Something like KYC, like a KYC attestation that a centralized company is making could be a signal, and it might even be a strong signal, but relying on it as like the primary signal is just back to centralized identity. And so if you really want to have decentralized identity, you need an enormous amount of information, on-chain and off-chain, that you can sort of capture and define algorithms over and then use to create a score that says, are you a person or are you not? And so, yeah, the big challenge right now for Optimism is not, the attestations themselves are not particularly complicated. It's like, actually, it's the first version of the contract was like 10 lines of code. But the complicated thing is actually getting the data in and making it accessible for other people to see what sort of data is available that they can then analyze and derive conclusions from. So that's sort of the main focus of what Optimism is working on right now.
Thank you. So we just have a few minutes left. So I want to level set and kind of not remind, but we're all on the same team. We're all trying to get to a better world, arguably. So I want to just take a step back and if we all do collectively win and these experiments succeed and we gain knowledge, what does that look like in 10 years? What are we unlocking for us? What are we unlocking for our users? What do we get that we don't have today? And we can just start with you, Evan, and we'll work our way down.
So at Disco, our definition of the metaverse is your ability to show up in any digital or physical environment and to receive a personalized experience based on the parts of yourself that you choose to share. That is why at Disco we believe that you are the multifaceted center of the party, just like this disco ball. You should reflect your data and your identity to the world however you decide. So what the future looks like is pretty bright for us. It's an awesome dance floor where everyone is welcome and invited, regardless of the level of technical literacy or the background that they have. It looks like us being able to seamlessly move through the doors of our building, through rideshare, airport security, border screenings, all the way to this conference without filling out forms and standing in lines like the 11 billion hours we spent filling out Eventbrites this week. It looks like personalized experiences everywhere you go, from ride shares to doctors' offices to shopping. It looks like never filling out a form again.
Yeah, for us at Impact Cards, a future would look like being able to share and signal to what you care about and what you spend your time doing and how you show up in the world, whether that's off-chain or on-chain. And then I think a really big part of it too is right now our ecosystem is exceptionally fragmented, and so that's why the cross-chain aspect of our project matters a lot as well. We want to be able to bring users together in one place and be able to show all of your interactions in one place. And so for us right now, that's an impact card, and it's centered around the design of impact or regenerative projects as well. So we see that on a meta scale, whether that's with impact or other important aspects of your life. Yeah.
Cool. And yeah, at Optimism, you know, the future that we want to see is that all this work that we've been doing to build these digital collaborative systems put power into people's hands and not into whoever has the most money and the most tokens, because that's not an act. Like, if we're crazy, if all we've built is the way for the people with the most money to have the most power, that seems nonsensical. And so we want to see a future where real people, real human beings are in control of their systems rather than the systems being in control of the people. So we'll get there one day.
Just trying to get unplugged from the matrix, y'all.
Well, we're almost at time, but we have a few more seconds. I know Kelvin, he conceded a little bit that, you know, we don't want everything on chain, certainly some private things. Evan, is there a place that you see there are useful on-chain attestations where, you know, this hardline vision of Disco is obviously off-chain, but do you see any value in some of these on-chain things as well and identity living?
Oh, absolutely. I love on-chain assets. In fact, I love them so much, I have ERC 721 tattooed on the back of my neck in the EIP font, and I convinced 42 other adults to get matching tattoos with me represent InkDAO. But my love for on-chain data is specific to data that is appropriate for that form. It makes me really sad to see people using suboptimal data containers when there are better options or more optimal options for our use cases. So I think data on-chain is super awesome when it is benefited by being globally available, public, accessible to everyone on Earth and in space with an internet connection, and when we need consensus around the transfer of one asset to another. I think that's a super awesome way for us to use on-chain data. I also think that accountability and transparency for non-human entities, organizations, governments, businesses, and communities, I think that's also a really fantastic use case. For financial settlement that involves this sort of global transparency, I think blockchains are fantastic. But for human beings who change and evolve, I think there is a more optimal data primitive, a way for us to show that we are humans who exist not bound to a single protocol, right? You are not an Ethereum person unable to use Instagram, unable to use Bitcoin. You are a person, not a token, not an address. And so, in instances where that's the case, let's keep this party off the chain.
Cool. Well, I just want to say thank you. I hope this was useful for everyone here. And obviously, these are very smart people who have thought about this problem deeply, and they'd probably be open to answering your questions. So I recommend it. They're a wealth of knowledge.
Thank you, Kames. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you in the metaverse. I'm Evan McMullen.
Woo!